Jason, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It's great to have you on the show. We're going to talk about running a whole bunch. I want to get started first and foremost. For those who don't know you yet, can you please tell us a few words about you? Who are you and what do you do, Jason?
Yeah, so I'm a runner and a running coach. I've been running myself since 1998. I ran high school and college and then competed post-collegiately for quite a long time. And, now I'm the head coach of strength running, my business, and host of the Strength Running podcast. I write a monthly column for Trail Runner magazine. And, I with the podcast and the Strength Running YouTube channel, I try to help runners achieve their potential and avoid a lot of the mistakes I made in my own running career.
Talking about your running career, what's your best or your favorite memory as a runner first?
Oh man, I have so many. I think growing up on a cross country and track team for every season, 8 years through high school and college, you have so many amazing experiences, and it's really about my friends, the people that I met and got to be friends with on the team, both in high school and college. Everything from getting lost in the woods when I was like 17 years old with my friends to having one of my very talented buddies pace me to a 5K PR during an outdoor track meet when I was in college. Uh, Racing the steeplechase when I was in college, which is that crazy event with the 3 foot high barriers, which is a little
Right.
difficult for a 5'7" guy like myself. But I loved all of those experiences and just having them with my team, with all my friends. Yeah, I'm just such a big believer in the fact that yeah, running is fun. It can also be kind of a hard sport, a lonely sport, but if you can do it with other people and share in some of that discomfort and suffering and everything that comes along with running, you're just going to get so much more out of it.
Yeah, it's a lot more fun when you're suffering with other people around you than when you're just by yourself.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, if you've never thrown up next to one of your best friends, are you even best friends?
Do you actually know each other? That's the real question. What's did you ever have a favorite distance that you competed on or that you prefer to train for?
Yeah, so I'm really a middle distance guy at heart. I know everyone loves the marathon these days, and it's sort of like the sexy event of everyone's choice right now. But I really loved anything from the 1500 to the 5K. And so that's the 1500 meters, the mile. I really liked the indoor 3000-meter race, which is
Mm.
probably the race that scared me the most because it's long enough to be challenging, but it's short enough where it's just so fast and you don't have any time to settle or sort of be patient at all. It's a very pedal to the metal sort of race.
Mhm.
The steeplechase and the 5K, I loved all those events. I'll go up a little bit to 8K cross country. That was the cross country distance that we raced. But I think these events are a lot more fun because it doesn't take like 6 months to train for it like a marathon does. And if it doesn't go well, you can just run another one next week. And the recovery time is a lot shorter. You give yourself more opportunity to learn the skill of racing. So my heart is definitely with those middle distances.
You talked about how the longer events nowadays are quite popular, are quite trendy. Where do you think that comes from?
Well, I just think it's a little bit more of a challenge to run a marathon than it is a 5K. Although I think racing a fast 5K is just as hard as racing a fast marathon. It's just the training is different and it requires a different approach. But a lot of people really like to give themselves that big of a challenge so that they can put that event on the calendar and then they can gradually work toward it over months. There's something special about that. I get that. And, a lot of runners like to graduate to the next higher up distance. They run their first 5K and then they run their first 10K and then they start thinking about, ooh, maybe I'll do a half marathon. And as soon as someone does a half marathon, the game is up. They're on the road to running their first marathon. It's gonna happen sooner or later.
Coming back to the middle distance events that you favored the most, talk to us about the nuances of pacing a 1500 versus a 5K, for example.
Yeah, I mean, pacing, I think, is the skill aspect of the sport of running. A lot of the sport is based on just your fitness level. And you can put your head down and just gain a lot of fitness. But if you don't understand some of the subtleties of pacing, it might be kind of challenging for you to run a really good middle distance race. So, in both of these races, it's really important to make sure that you're aggressive. But if you go out too fast, you can certainly go too anaerobic too soon. And then you sort of dig yourself into this hole, and the rest of the race is not going to turn out very well. So in a mile, you usually chunk the race into 400-meter segments. And you try to go out smart in the first 400. Don't go out too fast. Stay in control. Don't go with the leaders if you can't run their pace. The second lap is usually a lap where you need to start pushing just a little bit. You're starting to feel that fatigue. It's starting to become quite uncomfortable. And then in the third lap, things start really falling apart. The third lap is where most runners tend to slow down a lot. That's where we tend to psychologically lose a step
Mm.
because we're just in a world of pain and we want to give up. We're also not very close to the finish line. We still have, somewhere between 400 and 800 meters left in the race. And that's just a long time to be running mile race pace. And then when you get to a lap to go, it's sort of like, okay, anyone can just hammer the final 400 meters if you're in decent shape. So let's just forget about how tired we are. Let's forget about the fatigue and the acidosis in our muscles and that pleasant burning feeling that's actually not so pleasant, and just try to run as hard as we can to the finish. So it's just a very intense microcosm of what most races are like, and it's compressed into 4, 5, 6, 7 minutes, depending on your ability, which is just a short period of time to experience a pretty high level of suffering. And then I think the 5K is somewhat similar. Usually chunk it into each one of those miles. So you have, your first mile, you run smart. You try to hang on in the second mile. And then by the third mile, you're just doing everything you can to try to get to the finish line and not slow down too much. So it's a little bit more elongated. And I think the longer the race gets, the bigger chunks of distance that you're thinking about. The marathon, it's very common to chunk the race into 4 5-mile segments and then a final 10K. And
Mm.
so with each race distance, you can chunk it in slightly different ways.
It's interesting when you were talking about the mile with the 4 times 400. It reminded me of my time on the indoor rower on the 2000 meters, and that time between the 1,000 meter mark and the 1,500 is kind of that no man's land where, like you said, you're in a world of pain, but you're just too far from the end to actually see it finish, and it's psychologically probably the hardest part, right?
Yeah, like even in a workout, if you're doing 6 times 800 meters or something, the fourth or fifth rep is always the hardest rep. It's like when you're beyond halfway, but you're not in the home stretch. That's always the more physically difficult, but also psychologically because you're not quite, done yet. You're in that no man's land, and that's when you get all those negative voices telling you, slow down, quit. You can't do this. Why don't you just go a little bit easier and it'll be fine? So really have to do a lot of work to combat those voices.
Did you ever use any specific strategies when it came to preparing yourself mentally for those tough parts of the race, whether it's visualization or other modes of preparation that would kind of help you get through those difficult parts?
Yeah, I employed a couple different strategies that I think are valuable for all runners. I think visualizing a race can be really helpful. And visualizing really means, working your way through most of the race. And I did this a lot with middle distance races, and I tried to make the visualization take as long as the race itself. So in other words, I'm trying to do a real time run through of what the race is going to be like in my head, and, this is almost like meditation. You're going to get distracted. You're going to think, oh, my 6 minute mile, you're going to think you're done with it in 2 minutes in your mind. But, it's a lot of time. And um, I found that was helpful because I really want to put myself in the uncomfortable position that I'm going to experience in the race. And I want to give myself options, psychological options for how to deal with that. Do I look inward and try to gain strength that way? Do I focus on my competitors and look outward and really try to, yeah, try to distract myself from the pain? There are actually valuable benefits to both of those strategies. So you don't want to pick either or. You sort of want to go back and forth depending on where you're at. But visualization was always really helpful for me. Um, I always got a lot of confidence from the training itself. So if I was well prepared for a race, if I had done workouts that indicated I was ready to do what I was hoping to do on race day, that was always a great indication to me that I was physically ready. And then the only thing I needed to do was mentally put myself in a position where I could execute physically on that plan. So for me, a big part of it was just the training itself. Let's make sure that I'm not making the training super easy and then expecting myself to be incredibly mentally tough on race day because you never really rise to the level of your expectations. You always fall to the level of your training, which I think is just a great line that is so true in endurance running.
Yeah, I literally have this quote on one of my t-shirts that I made early on in my coaching career. I think it's absolutely a fantastic way to encapsulate what it means to train and be ready for something, right? You're not just gonna power through because you want it enough. You have to prepare, and if your prep is at the right level for what you're expecting to do, then it's probably gonna go as planned. Um, it's funny that you said in the visualization process that you use the exact times. I remember a little parallel prepping for my first indoor rowing competition, and I did exactly that. I took the time that I was hoping to row, and I actually set a metronome so that I could count my strokes on the rower. And I actually visualized in my head with each stroke the meters counting down from 2000. So I knew I did about 10 meters a stroke, or a bit more, a bit less, I forget. And I could just see the numbers go into my head, go down bit by bit. And when I got to the end, it was over. And it just helped me so much getting on the rower, knowing that I just had to focus on the numbers and count my reps to 10. And then eventually it would be over. And again, when you're in a world of pain, it helps to have that mental focus. And it's incredible how much preparing ahead of time, even just inside your mind, seeing it, visualizing it, the brain can't make the difference, right? It's real if you see it. I remember a great weightlifter, Ilya Ilin, talking about this. He said, when I went to lift an Olympic record, I had lifted that bar 1,000 times in my head. The feeling of the chalk on the bar, the sound of the crowd, the lights, all the sensations. I had lived them so many times that when I got up there on the platform, it was just a routine move to just do my job because I had just done it so many times already, right?
I love that so much. Yeah, you're really on the right track here because it is really powerful. And I love when you were talking about how you really need to visualize every aspect of what you're about to do, not just what it's going to look like in your brain, but what is it going to smell like? What is your mouth going to feel like when you have a minute left and you have dry mouth and you're a little dehydrated, but you can't stop because then reaching for that water bottle is going to slow you down. And so putting yourself really in the exact position that you're going to be and trying to imagine all of your senses and what they're going to be experiencing. Like for running, it's how are your legs going to feel hitting the ground? Is this different when you're kicking than when you're 400 meters into the race and you're just sort of getting settled into the race? And this is a very methodical kind of geeky way to prepare for an athletic competition because it's a little bit cringe to kind of sit around and just imagine your competition, but this kind of methodical approach is really powerful. And I think the hardest part about it is actually sitting down and making yourself try to do it because, who has time for this? Training's more important anyway. And, it can be this thing that, you easily put off and then never do, but it can give you a significant advantage on race day.
Yeah, I spent some time recently digging into the literature on RPE, on rating of perceived exertion, and I knew it was pretty solid, but I was pretty amazed at actually how robust it is. And I think it's still a very underrated metric in training in general. And I think we should learn to feel a little bit more and feel a little bit better. And that it's going to help us in all areas of life and training, right?
Yeah, with the RPE, it's interesting because on the one hand, it is this like language that your body speaks because perceived exertion is really a combination of your respiration rate and how the wind feels against your skin, how you perceive your legs to be moving relative to the ground. And there's all these like little subtleties of how you are sensing your effort. And getting to know that, I think, is a difficult proposition because it takes a lot of time. You know, a runner with 6 months of experience doesn't understand how their body is speaking to them the same way that someone with 10 years of running experience is really going to understand that. And unfortunately, look, I think we're definitely a little bit detached from that language because we're so reliant on our smartwatches and tracking every little metric. And when we can put a number on something as opposed to just feeling something subjectively, it becomes somewhat more important in our mind. You know,
Mhm.
would rather say, you know, even though I feel good today, my HRV is low. So I'm going to make that negatively affect my workout because I'm going to be thinking about that. Where maybe if you were just focused on how you were feeling rather than obsessing over the metric, you might have actually had a better workout. So it's just an interesting way to think about, um, you know, listening to your body and learning what different perceived exertions feel like. Because you can certainly feel more gears or different levels of exertion if you're more experienced, for sure.
One thing that changed my approach to training a lot was Steven Seiler's three Ps when he talks about performance, physiology, and perception. And ideally, you can't always have all three, but if you can have one of each, you're going to really be on the right track when it comes to quantifying an effort, right? So if we talk about performance, we have maybe a pace. Physiology, we might have lactate, we might have heart rate, and then our perception. And that perception is at the same level in terms of importance as the other two, right? We shouldn't put one above the other. They work together. There's an external load, there's internal load, and if we can combine all that, then we're probably a little bit closer to the truth.
Yeah, that's probably the best case scenario is where you understand perceived exertion. You also have reliable metrics that are showing you what your performance is. And then, yeah, if you're fancy and can test your lactate or something like that, you know, that'd be the best.
I want to go back to what you said before. You had some key workouts that you like to do before certain races or certain distances. So, could you give us an example of a key workout that you would do before a mile, and then a key workout that you would use for a 5K, for example?
Yeah. So, you know, I think if anyone's training for these middle distances, I think it's probably a good idea to do a race specific workout maybe about 2 weeks before your main competition so that you're sort of giving yourself a very similar stimulus as the race itself. Now, you can also just run the same race. You know, you can just race a mile or race a 5K as a tune up race. And that is arguably even better than a more race specific workout. And, you know, like I mentioned earlier, you can run these kinds of races more frequently. So if it doesn't go well, you can plan another one in a week or two. Whereas if your marathon doesn't go well, you sort of just have to recover and then get back on the horse and start training again. The next thing you know, it takes another 4 to 5 months to race another marathon. So you can certainly race your way to fitness. So you don't necessarily need these kinds of race specific workouts, but I think they are going to prepare you more specifically for the demands of the event. So if we just look at like some really some good workouts that look like the race itself, you know, for the mile, I might have someone do about 2,000 meters worth of work. So it's a little bit longer than the race itself, just because the mile is so short. And I would want you to be running at your goal pace or maybe slightly faster. So something like, you know, you could do something as simple as 5 times 400 meters, and you give yourself a relatively short recovery of maybe a minute or 90 seconds. And this is an active recovery, you know, so you're jogging really slow, you're still moving, you're not just standing around. And you would want to run those 400s close to your mile race pace. So let's just say you're trying to run a 5 minute mile. We'll make our math really easy here. So you're trying to run 75 seconds per 400. I would want you to maybe start at 75, but I would want to see some 73s, a 74. And if you can run this kind of a workout, I would be pretty confident that you could hit those 75s on race day. You're going to be a little bit more rested. You're going to be in a different hormonal state because, it's an actual real race. You have competitors, you have the official with the starting gun. You just get a little more nervous beforehand, which is just your body's way of getting excited. And that's going to go a long way at helping you race a little bit faster than you potentially could in practice. And then for the 5K, I would do something like 3 times the mile at your goal 5K race pace, again, with a very short recovery. And, these workouts are just as hard as the race itself in a lot of ways. So these would be my go-to race specific workouts for these middle distance races that um, accomplish a couple things. Number one, it's a similar distance as the race itself. And I think when the distance gets longer, the event gets longer, you probably don't want to do the same volume as the race itself. So the extreme example is the marathon. Nobody does 26.2 miles worth of marathon pace running in a workout before they go line up on race day, even the best runners in the world. So that rule sort of breaks down at those longer events. But, for let's say the 10K and shorter, you can pretty much do a similar volume as the race. And, if you're training for something really short, like the mile or the 800, you probably want to do a little bit more volume because you're capable of that because of the rest.
So when we go into those longer distances, half marathon, marathon, what would you recommend as a prep session or as a bit of a test day a couple weeks out, maybe even a little bit more? Would it be maybe say 75% of the distance? Would you break it up? Would you do it in one go? What's your approach there?
Yeah, so I mean, we can take each distance separately. So let's start with the half marathon. I think the half marathon is a race where um, you could do, say, a 15 to 18-mile long run and include some repetitions at goal half marathon pace. You don't necessarily need to go 13 miles worth of that kind of effort. That would, I think, that would just really beat your legs up and give you a stimulus that would just maybe be too hard. And so, the recovery required for that would maybe overshadow the positive adaptations that you would get from a session like that. So I would want to see something like, okay, maybe you go run 18 miles and you're going to run, 4 times 2 miles at your goal half marathon pace with a couple minutes of easy jogging recovery. So the half marathon pace is going to still be aerobic. You're not going into oxygen debt to run half marathon pace. So, you don't necessarily need, 3 or 4 minutes recovery, but I also don't want it to be just a kind of a grind, just a whole slog of, like 8 miles worth of half marathon pace running, especially if you've already been running for 5 or 6 miles, as your warm up, you're going to be, a little bit more tired. And that's kind of the point of this workout is, yeah, you're not doing as much volume at half marathon pace, but you're doing this work after running a whole bunch of miles, maybe 4 to 7 miles. So you're in a pre-fatigue state. And, you're going to have some running after as a cool down. So the total stimulus of this workout is something that I think is reasonable, but is also fairly specific to the half marathon distance. And then for the marathon, we could keep it simple. We could do something like 20 miles with 10 miles at goal marathon pace. And that to me is a great marathon specific workout. It's stressful, but for the, fairly well-trained marathoner, it's very doable. I wouldn't have, your beginner or maybe even intermediate marathoner do this workout. We could do something a little bit less stressful, maybe not 10 miles worth of goal pace running, maybe 5 to 7. And we could also chunk it so that we're doing repetitions at goal pace rather than one long kind of grind at goal pace. So there's always a lot of different ways to make the workout a little bit harder, a little bit easier. You can include repetitions or a steady effort or, any one of those options to sort of change the difficulty of the session.
I want to go into your some of your favorite topics, talk about weightlifting for runners, injuries in running. Before that, if we take a 30,000-foot bird's eye view on your career and your experience so far, what would you say has changed the most about your perspective on running since you started?
Since I started, well, I didn't think runners really needed to do much strength training at all when I first started. And I thought that, hey, all this running that we're doing, these fast workouts, these hill workouts, isn't that enough exercise for your legs? Like, do I really need to lift weights? What is that possibly going to give me? And now I've done a complete 180. I don't even consider strength training cross training. It's not something that's a nice to do. It's really just part of the training we have to do as runners if we want to achieve our potential. So that's probably the biggest 180 that I've done in my 26 plus year running career is just a complete change on my approach to strength training. Now I think it's super valuable. I think everyone should be doing some form of strength training for injury prevention reasons, but also for performance reasons to actually race faster, to improve your running economy. I know a lot of runners want to improve their body composition too. And, I'm okay with a couple vanity goals thrown into our training. And if you want to look better, there's probably no better thing to do than some weight training. So, yeah, that's definitely the biggest one.
Perfect segue. So besides not doing strength training, what are the biggest mistakes that you see when it comes to runners and strength training in general?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because that is definitely the number one mistake is just not to do anything. I think something is better than nothing. So I'd rather you do almost any kind of strength training off rather than not do any at all. But, some of the bigger mistakes, if you really wanted to dial in your strength training and really make it quite specific to the sport of running, you're not trying to get bigger muscles, you're not trying to enter a powerlifting competition. Those goals aren't really the goals that runners have. We want to focus on strength and power in the weight room. We don't want to focus on hypertrophy. So that's probably mistake number one is just following a bodybuilding program. The 4 days a week, 5 days a week, you're in the gym for 90 minutes or 2 hours. You're focusing on buys and tries, or you have back day. That language and that split and focus that's taken from the world of bodybuilding. Now, if you want to get big muscles, that's a great way to go. And, I'm not certainly not knocking it, but it's just not the type of strength training we have to do as runners. And that's good news because most runners don't actually like to spend a lot of time in the weight room, would rather be running. So the good news is that we don't need to spend nearly as much time in the gym as a bodybuilder. Now, the other big mistake I've seen runners make, and this one makes a lot of intuitive sense, is that they get in the gym and they lift for endurance. They do 4 or 5 sets of an exercise. They go 20, 25, even up to 30 repetitions. And, the thinking kind of does make sense, right? Like I'm an endurance runner. I want to gain endurance. So let me go in the gym and work on muscular endurance. And that's exactly what you're working on when you do these kinds of strength workouts. But the problem is, we already work on our endurance so much as runners. That's what we do. We go out there and we run and we just spend a lot of time, building our endurance and fine-tuning our aerobic metabolism. But when we get in the gym, we just have different goals. Sort of like, if you go to the physical therapist's office, you're not going to be doing a long run there. You're not going to be working on your endurance. You're probably going to be fixing an injury or trying to get healthy. So when we go in the gym, we have a similar goal. It's not endurance, it's strength and power. So we can work on getting stronger. We can work on moving that weight more quickly and building some explosivity into our training. And that's certainly going to help because, what is running very fast except a very powerful movement? We're trying to generate a lot of power, and that's going to help us kick faster at the end of races and really just have a bigger reserve of strength and power to draw from. That's going to help us become faster runners. And then I'd say, maybe the final big mistake that I've seen is just sort of this ad hoc approach to strength training where, one week you'll try this body weight workout that you saw in Runner's World. And then the next week you're going with your buddy to a CrossFit workout of the day. And then the week after that, you're taking a Pilates class. And, there's really no progression. There's no methodical approach to the strength training. And, again, something is better than nothing. So I'd much rather see a runner exposing themselves to this kind of an approach. But if you really want to build strength and power, you sort of need to progress gradually over time. And that does take a more concerted approach. Whereas, just sampling different classes and workouts, you're never trying the same thing a second time. So it's really hard to gauge your progress. Sort of like a runner who, never builds their long run or progresses a workout. They're sort of just doing random things all the time. Their fitness isn't really going to progress too much. So we need to take a similar approach in the weight room.
Hey, real quick, I've prepared a free mini course to help you understand everything that you absolutely need to know on training zones, how to train zone 2 for your sport, and how to organize your endurance training in general. You can sign up for free using the link in the description.
I love your take on that. Going back to what you said about, lifting for endurance because this is what you're trying to do with running. I feel like there's a big disconnect and a misunderstanding of the principle of specificity. I think people hear specificity and that it's an important principle in training. And at least what I understand of that is that specificity just says that your body is going to adapt in a specific way to the demands that you're going to impose upon it, right? The set principles, specific adaptations to impose demands. And so obviously every different type of training is going to target certain things, certain parts of your body, certain adaptations, and this is what's going to happen from it. But what I see a lot is people thinking that, oh, we need to train specificity, so we need to do everything like our sport. We need to make everything look like our sport. Do you see that as well on your side?
Yeah, 100%. And on the one hand, a big fan of specificity. I think it's going to help you to get where you want to go. But at the same time, if we think of, a pyramid of training strategies, your specific workouts and all that specific work that you need to do, this is the very tip of the pyramid. Often because it's the most challenging kind of work that we can do. If you're a power lifter, a one rep max is very challenging, and you probably don't want to do that every day. So if we think about that as the very tip of this pyramid, it, number one, rests upon a foundation of less specific training. And number two, represents a tiny minority of your overall training. So if you want to run a fast 5K, you might go out and run a 15-mile long run this weekend. That is not specific to your event at all. But this running coach over here is thrilled that you are building your endurance so much with that long run that is only going to help your 5K. You can also go to the track and run, 8 times 200 meters, which is half a lap on an outdoor track with full recovery. And you might go, faster than mile race pace. That's not very specific to that 5K, but I also think that's a fantastic workout. We're building leg speed. We're building comfort at very fast speeds. We're building power. We're boosting your running economy. So I think you have to use specificity almost as the icing on the cake, as one of the last things you do to sort of, put the cherry on top. You're ready to go compete. But that cherry has to rest upon a fully formed cake that takes a lot more time to build. It's the overall mileage, it's your long runs, it's doing, some aerobic workouts, some very fast workouts. But hopefully they're gradually going to coalesce into that race specific workout that we talked about first. And then you're doing all kinds of other things. You're doing drills, you're doing strides, you're lifting weights in the gym. Some of your training strategies are going to be very specific to the demands of the race. And some of your training strategies are just going to be because you are trying to improve your physiology in a certain way. So that 200-meter workout I just mentioned might be working on running economy and power. Okay, those are more physiological concepts rather than on this 5K specific workout of 3 times a mile at your goal pace with a short recovery. That's not really targeting a certain physiology. That's basically like taking a practice exam. Can you do the test? If you can take the practice test, if you can execute well, it's going to give you the confidence you need to then go do it on race day. So yeah, we want specificity, but we also want all the general things that are then going to enable that specificity.
I think understanding that almost allows people to relax and accept the fact that not every workout needs to look like what you're going to do on race day, and that the general physical prep part again does not have to look in any way, shape, or form in what you're going to have to execute in your race, but it's still a very important component of training. And I would maybe even argue that the higher your level, the more the general part takes space, because you talked about at the beginning, you can race yourself to fitness, especially when you begin. But the higher levels you reach, the more taxing it becomes to actually do the race or do the event or do that specific speed and intensity. And so the more you have to spend time developing the general part so you can better come back to the specifics when it matters.
Yeah, the more general work you do, that then it enables more of the specific work. So you can imagine someone who runs 100 miles a week and they're also cycling for 4 hours a week and they're lifting weights twice a week. And then they start training for the mile. They're going to be able to do a lot of workouts because they're just so strong. They have built so much general strength that they're then just capable of a much higher workload. And I think it's helpful to know that like it's impossible to actually do specific work day after day because it's generally way too taxing. So that's why we have to include a lot of that other types of training, which, in the long term is more capacity building. I think we can categorize running training into, this is a simplistic view, but categorize it into a capacity building type of training session or a utilization type of training session. And so the specific workouts are a utilization workout. They help you utilize your current fitness level more efficiently. And the capacity building work, that's like running high mileage. It's like going on a tempo or lactate threshold run. It's a long run. It's not specifically helping your 5K. Maybe it's specifically helping your marathon, but it's not really helping your goal race for the most part. But it is building your capacity for more training in the future. So the long-term approach is to do a lot more capacity building work than utilization work. Another way to think about it is like, you go do that VO2 max workout. That VO2 max workout is going to make your mitochondria work more efficiently, but it's not really going to build more mitochondria. Now, you need both approaches, right? But first, let's build as many mitochondria as we can with long runs, with aerobic workouts, with overall mileage. Maybe we're supplementing that mileage with more aerobic cross training. If you're limited by, being an injury prone athlete, you can't run as much. Okay, we can supplement with cross training. And all that is just building that aerobic metabolism, building even more mitochondria, and increasing your capacity for more training at some point in the future.
Yeah, there's a really interesting paper that came out not so long ago talking about that mitochondrial adaptation and how slow twitch fibers have a different mitochondrial type or profile than fast twitch fibers. And the slow twitch ones have about 3 times more in terms of volume. And when you stimulate, when you train, when you fatigue those slow twitch fibers with low intensity training with high volume, they're going to increase in capacity. Like you said, they're going to have more size, a better mitochondrial capacity. And when you train your fast twitch fibers, they have less mitochondria if we talk about volume, but that mitochondria is a lot more efficient at using oxygen. It can use a lot more per unit of mitochondria. And when you train those fibers, then it's just going to make it use oxygen faster, but not necessarily build more mitochondria. So it ties right into what you just said here. And that actually is specificity, right? When you're at low intensity, we specifically recruit and use and fatigue and change our slow twitch fibers. And when we go fast, we're going to recruit and change our fast twitch fibers. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about specificity of adaptations.
And one of the things I love about physiology is that it's almost never either or. It's almost never binary. You can do a workout and you think you're doing, a lactate threshold zone 4 workout, but you're going to spend a little bit of time in zone 3. You're going to spend a little bit of time in zone 5, and you're going to get a little bit more of this blended stimulus. And the same is true for, your slow twitch versus fast twitch muscle fibers. If you go for, let's say, a 20-mile run and you run the last 10 miles at your marathon pace, like you said, you start fatiguing those slow twitch muscle fibers. So what ends up happening is your body starts recruiting your fast twitch muscle fibers to help pick up some of the slack, to help, contribute to the work that you're doing. And so you can actually get faster just by doing long runs. And so it's just a really great example of the fact that you're working a variety of things all the time. And so trying to pigeonhole one workout or one training stimulus into this specific bucket often is a little bit misguided because we're often training a whole bunch of things at once.
I think that's the best way of putting it. The biggest change in my mind that came from understanding physiology and endurance training better is when I switched to thinking about energy systems and trying to train energy systems separately, and then understanding that actually within, I think it's about 150 milliseconds after a muscular contraction, all the energy systems are actually in play and everything works together. And there is no regeneration of phosphocreatine, and there is no glycolysis that can last forever if the aerobic system isn't running, right? We can look at those equations in isolation and write them on a piece of paper, and there's no oxygen in glycolysis, there's no oxygen in phosphocreatine, but inside the body, it all works together. You can't just use one system and not use the other. So again, yeah, thinking in these broader terms and trying to make everything work together makes a lot more sense than just trying to say, oh, I'm working this specifically or that specifically. Everything works together. Obviously, it varies in degrees depending on what you do, but I think it's still the best way of seeing it. I got distracted. You talked about mitochondria, and I love that topic. Going back to strength training. So let's say I'm a runner. I run 3-4 times a week. I love running. I don't really like the gym, but I hear this podcast and Jason said you got to lift. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to lift. Where do you start? What's the first thing to put in place? You talked about the right type of strength training for runners. So where should a beginner start?
So I think if you have never done much strength training at all and say you're running a couple days a week, I think one of the best things you could do is not actually get into the weight room just yet, but start doing a lot of body weight strength training. Because number one, we sort of just want to build the habit first. And for a lot of runners, that's the hard part. Building the habit so that you can actually adhere to some kind of strength program. And I have this concept called sandwiching. Sounds kind of silly, but really what we're doing is we are sandwiching your run in between a dynamic warm up before you go running and then some type of post-run core or strength workout. And, I have a whole bunch of routines on the strength running site that take 10 to 20 minutes. These are body weight routines. Sometimes you might use like an exercise band or a light implement like a medicine ball. But the goal here is really to take a lot of exercises from the world of physical therapy to keep you healthy. So yeah, you're not going to gain as much strength as power as you would in the weight room, but you are going to build a lot of injury resilience. You are going to get stronger, especially if you haven't done any strength training. So these kinds of runners are what I would call a blank slate. Any amount of strength training is going to make them stronger. So let's start them kind of at step one. Step one is just the body weight stuff. And if you can sandwich every run between that dynamic warm up and 10 to 20 minutes of runner specific body weight, strength, and core work, you're going to be in a really good position. You're going to start feeling a lot better on your runs. You're going to feel a little bit stronger, a little bit more capable, a little bit smoother. And that's going to go a long way at turning your next major injury into a niggle and turning your next niggle into nothing at all. Once you've done that, once you've sort of built this habit of, okay, I do a little bit of strength work after each one of my runs, it's a really nice cool down. I feel better during the rest of the day after I do this kind of strength work. Now let's take the next step and get into the weight room. I think the basics work really well for runners. I don't think we need to, get super fancy because then it makes it inaccessible for most athletes. So focusing on some of the more fundamental exercises like the squat, the deadlift, bench press, overhead press, and then a lot of the variations of those exercises, there's dozens for each one of those exercises. That goes a long way. And our goal here is at first, we might want to do something pretty simple like 3 sets of 10. Let's get comfortable with relatively heavier weight. Let's get comfortable with the movements. I think it can be really easy to absolutely destroy yourself in day one in the weight room. And I've made this mistake myself after a long time without lifting weights. And hey, this doesn't seem hard, but then the next day I can barely go running. So you definitely want to reduce the intensity so that you can actually continue training the rest of the week. And then after a couple of weeks, you'll get a much better sense of, okay, this is hard for me. I can lift a little bit more weight. I can progress a little bit, and you'll just get a better sense, sort of like when we were talking about RPE earlier. You'll get a sense of what kind of weights your body is capable of lifting. Yeah, so that's what I would consider, the ideal split of strength training for runners is, sandwich your runs, get in a fair amount of body weight strength work, do a lot of exercises taken from physical therapy so that you can do it as prehab and stay healthy. And then once you're ready, you can replace two of those post-run, shorter body weight sessions with a session in the gym. Getting in the gym, doing some, heavier weightlifting. You can progress to doing some more power movements, some basic Olympic lifts, moving the bar quickly. And that's really going to help you build a little bit more coordination, build more power and explosivity. And especially if you're a middle distance runner, that's really going to come in handy.
I like your sandwiching idea. I think it's a really easy concept to visualize and to integrate into your routine. And talk about behavior change. I think you're right on the money when it comes to that. That's the hardest part, right? Is doing something and then sticking with it. I remember there's a great book about behavior change called Switch by Dan and Phil Heath. And I
Mhm.
love the image that they use. They say instead of thinking about a milestone, you have to think about inch pebbles. So you have to set up tiny little goals that you can really easily accomplish. So instead of looking up at that bar that's maybe 2 meters up and you're like, how am I going to get over that? You need to set it so low that you could just step over it every single day and make it so easy so that you literally train that muscle, that repetition of just integrating that into literally who you are and what you do on a daily or a weekly basis. And once it becomes automatic, then you can start, making it a little bit more challenging. But we always want to start with the really hard thing when really we should start with the easy thing, do it again and again and again. And then the hard thing almost comes by itself and naturally, and we take pleasure in it too.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much pleasure in doing the fundamentals well. And I think it's no surprise that some of the best athletes in the world still rigorously adhere to the fundamentals of their sport. And, they're just so adamant about executing those fundamentals really, really well. So for runners, yeah, that's warming up for your run, doing that dynamic warm up. That's making sure that the beginning of your run is a little bit easier to help yourself ease into the effort. And then, if you want to get a little frisky at the end, of a distance run, that's kind of where that effort can come, and really just focusing on the process of training, which is really important.
And back to the strength training, you said, you don't have to be fancy or do anything complicated. One thing that helped me a lot is instead of thinking in exercises, thinking in patterns. So, like you said, we have a squat, which is kind of a dominant flexion pattern. And then you have a deadlift, which is a hinge, more posterior chain. And then the upper body, you have a push and you have a pull. And if you do this and you do some core work, you can put literally any exercise into each of one of those boxes. And obviously that can evolve depending on your level and where you start. But that allows you to really have a very simple routine, but that's very complete, right? Compared to what you were talking about earlier and do body splits and train bis and tris and spend all your time on those. And next thing you know, all you trained is your arms and nothing else. It's not that complicated, right? It doesn't have to be complicated for it to be effective. We think that it needs to be, but really, if we go to the simple things and do them really well, that's where most of the good stuff comes from.
Yeah, you can get very far with that kind of a basic focus on the fundamental lifts for sure. And of course, if you want to get more fancy, you certainly can. I partnered with a USA weightlifting national coach to build a periodized weightlifting program for runners. And
Mm.
so this is the fancy approach where, you basically have a 16-week period of time, just like your 16-week running plan. And the weightlifting's periodized to match the goals of your running plan. So, at the beginning, it's like base training. It's more basic. We are building capacity. We're doing basic lifts. And then we start building a little more power. We start adding in plyometrics. You can start, lifting heavier weights, but for fewer repetitions, adding in some of those explosive movements, and really structure the program in such a way so that by the time your race rolls around, you're strong, but also capable of just producing a lot of power very quickly. And you're just ready to run, your race at a peak performance level. So you can certainly get fancy if you want to, it's there for those runners who, kind of want to leave no stone unturned and really discover their potential. But for most runners, the beginners, the intermediates, the people who haven't added any strength training, just start sandwiching your runs. You're going to start feeling so much better. And I would love to hear from any of your listeners who actually do this. Shoot me an email, let me know, give it a couple weeks, and I know you're just going to feel transformed.
Yeah, the link to strengthrunning.com is in the description. So please listen to Jason and please send him an email as well. When it comes to those dynamic warm-ups, what are some of the key exercises that you would include in there to not only prepare you for the upcoming run, but also build over time that resilience and help prevent some of those common injuries we see in running?
Yeah, so I have a pretty simple warm up routine. I just call it the standard warm up. I called it that just because I started doing it before all of my runs and I didn't know what to call it. So it's like, the standard one, the one I just do all the time. So the standard warm up is about a 9 or 10 minute routine that includes about 10 different exercises. The main ones would be a sequence of lunges. So you're going to do 5 different lunges. You're going to do between, let's say, 4 to 10 lunges per lunge type. And then a bunch of, hip and glute focused exercises like maybe side leg raises. We might do donkey kicks. These are funny names for weird exercises. It's better if you just saw them. And then some leg swings. And that's a pretty good start. You're going to accomplish all the goals of an actual warm up, which is let's increase our heart rate, our respiration. Let's open up our range of motion, lubricate our joints, really just metabolically prime our body for running. If you kind of think of any hard exercise as, the top of a ramp, we want to be able to gradually go up that ramp and not just try to go from couch to 5K specific workout, because you're not going to feel very good if you do that. So you want a very gradual workout. And step number one is that dynamic warm up. So yeah, I mean, anyone can just go on Strength Running and search standard warm up. There's a video, the list of exercises is right there, and you can just plug it right into your training program. And I think this is the kind of warm up where anyone can do it. I mean, a beginner can do it, a professional runner can do it. It's really just, a good metabolic and muscular warm up for your body before you go running.
Talk about the importance of foot strength, ankle strength, lower leg strength when it comes to not only being able to do the running workouts, but then really absorb them properly and not just, get those niggles, those shin splints and those things that we commonly see maybe in beginners or people that maybe try to run a little bit more, bite a little bit more than they can chew when it comes to running.
Yeah, this is a very common area for injuries because it includes a lot of muscles, but there are a lot of very small muscles. So the potential for them to get hurt is fairly high. I like to take a multi-pronged approach here. So we're going to do a lot of different things in our training, and even outside of our training. So maybe we'll even start with the non-running things that we can do to build some foot and lower leg strength. I like to see athletes spend as much time barefoot casually as possible. So if you're in your home, if you're playing with your kids out in the backyard or something like that, provided your backyard isn't a bunch of rocks, maybe we can just be barefoot the whole time. And that's going to build a lot of foot and lower leg strength. Also, just a lot of proprioception and just learning how to, engage your foot and where it is in space and use your foot a little bit more effectively. I also like to see runners wear shoes that aren't overly cushioned and supportive, shoes that allow your toes to splay, allow, your arch to compress a little bit. You actually don't want a whole bunch of arch support in your shoe. Um, I do think orthotics are overprescribed. I'm not saying they're useless. I'm just saying they're overprescribed. So it might be something that is a little bit of a crutch for some runners. And, they often, studies have shown they often don't do what they're designed to do, which is change how your foot moves.
Mm.
So, what are they doing if they're not doing that? So I'm a little hesitant about pretty substantial orthotic use because it can result in some atrophy of the foot musculature. I also like to do just the general strength training. So, let's do the sandwiching. Let's get in the gym twice a week. If you want to lift weights, either barefoot or in very, very minimalist shoes, I think that's a really good approach. There's no surprise that, really good power lifters either go barefoot or they wear almost nothing on their feet because they really want to be able to feel the ground. And that really helps build some extra strength in your feet and lower legs too. And then finally, we can actually do some more specific strengthening for our feet and lower legs. You can do all kinds of different exercises in sand, for example, where you're walking on your heels, you're walking on the balls of your feet, you're walking on the insides and outsides of your feet. You can use a towel and scrunch it up with your toes. You can put a very heavy book on the end of that towel. You can practice picking up Legos or marbles or whatever little toy your kid has left all on the floor with your toes. And these things really help build strength and a little bit more coordination in those smaller muscles. And then if you do want to do a tiny bit of barefoot running, I'm a big proponent of this, but it's kind of like Elmer's glue. A dab will do ya. Don't try to be the next like barefoot Sean, or you'll probably just end up, with plantar fasciitis or a stress fracture. We don't want that. So do something like finishing your run with a minute of barefoot running on grass. That's going to seem like it's not a lot, but you're going to do a minute for a couple of weeks. Then you might do 2 minutes for a couple of weeks. Then you might do some strides. So those 100-meter accelerations after your run, it might be nice to take off your shoes and do them on a nice, well-manicured field or a synthetic turf field, just to get a little bit more of that ground feel and to build some strength in your feet. Because these are all the little muscles that are often ignored by runners, especially now that super cushioned shoes are in vogue and they're quite popular. When we sort of turn our feet off and we just let the new age foam and the carbon fiber plates do all the work for us. But if you can wear those kinds of shoes with strong feet, you're going to be a better runner for it.
Did you know that I've recently started an all English YouTube channel? If you're not following me there yet, please take a few seconds to go subscribe to the Upside Strength English channel and get access to hundreds of hours of free content.
Yeah, the best analogy I heard was imagine wearing oven mitts on your hands for 10 years and then you take them off and we ask you to play the piano. How's that going to go?
That's a good analogy.
It's kind of the same with the feet, right? If they're always supported, then they don't have to do the work themselves to support themselves. And so not wearing the shoe, working all those tiny muscles, that's going to, help build literally a better base of the foot and then help you, better absorb training, better tolerate the volume of running you're going to do. And that's something that I see a lot with beginners. Once they start including those exercises, usually the shin splints and all of that, it goes away pretty quickly because now they have the strong foundation and they can actually do the running and absorb the running like they should and not just, get hammered by it.
Yeah, 100%. A lot of beginners often find that without being strong first, their first running injury is just right around the corner. So that's why I like to, make sure that beginners aren't running really high volumes. They're not doing really hard workouts, but they are doing much more strength training than even an advanced runner might. The advanced runner, hey, they can skip a core workout every now and then. They could take the first mile of their run super easy and skip the warm up. They have years of this consistency behind them that's working to their advantage when the beginner doesn't. So I like to see the beginner actually more strict with being process oriented because they have a little bit more to lose.
Going back to run training, if we talk about zone two for a second, what is the best way in your mind to do zone two training without equipment, without testing? What are your guidelines for someone who'd like to do that training, that would like to do it right, ideally? And we can talk about, do you have to do it perfectly right? What does that entail? We'll get back to this, but yeah, how would you recommend someone do zone two training?
Zone two training is really important. I think it is also maybe up on a pedestal right now, and a lot of folks are a little bit obsessed with zone two training. We probably have Peter Attia and his book Outlive to thank for that, because he talks a lot about zone two training and the importance of VO2 max. And one of the things we talked about earlier was that you're never really training one thing. There's always several different energy systems that are being targeted when you go for any kind of training run. And the same is true if you go for a zone two run. Now, I'm old enough to remember when we just called zone two runs easy runs. And so easy is not really a pace. It's really about an effort. And zone two is really about a lactate level in your blood. And so you can sort of marry the two. And, no one is testing their blood for lactate levels when they're running unless you're in a physiology lab, which if you have access to that, let me know. I'd like to come join you and do some fun testing. But for most of us, we can just run by perceived effort when we go running. Now, before I even talk about that, it's going to be harder for the beginner because the beginner really only has they can walk and that's easy, or maybe they run and it's either like kind of hard or very hard. They just don't have a lot of those gears. So I think this is going to be very difficult for the true beginner, especially the true beginner without a high fitness level. So, but for most runners, a zone two effort is going to feel easy. It's going to feel like a very sustainable effort that you could run for an entire long run. So this is your long run effort if it's an easy long run. And I like to have runners use the 3 C's of easy running. Let's make sure the run is comfortable. So you just feel subjectively comfortable when you're running. It doesn't feel like you're pressing on the accelerator a little bit. It doesn't feel like you're pushing. It's just a very sustainable, comfortable effort. It's also controlled. So you don't feel out of control. Your legs don't feel like they're spinning underneath you at this unsustainable rate. You're not pushing. It's just very controlled. And then finally, it's conversational. So if you're running with someone, you could have a conversation back and forth. Now, you're not going to be able to have this kind of a conversation with these long sentences and, a lot of time in between breaths because you are going to be running. But if you can get out 4, 5, 6 words, take a breath, continue on, and you're not, incredibly out of breath, we can be pretty confident that you are in zone two. Now, I also don't think it's super important to, strictly target zone two. If you start a little bit easier and you go for, say, a 5-mile run, you might have mile one mostly in zone one. And then you have a majority of the run in zone two. But then maybe by the end of the run, you're feeling kind of good. You're fully warmed up. You might want to push the effort a little bit. And, the last mile, your heart rate might creep into that zone 3 territory. I think this is the perfect execution of an easy run. It's not overly stressful. You're getting all the benefits of an easy run, but we're also spending time in 3 zones as opposed to just one, zone 2. And, that's sort of how most high level runners treat their runs. It's never the same pace or effort for the entire duration of the run. You'll see some of the East African marathoners, who can run a marathon at like 440-mile pace. They might start their long run at 9 or 9:30 per mile, and then they gradually progress down to maybe about 5 minutes a mile by the very end of the run. So the whole run is this aerobic progression for them. And I think that's a really good model for most of us.
Yeah, and I think we shouldn't get, too tied up in absolutely staying in zone two, and that, I've heard people say, oh, if you get out of zone two, then you've essentially ruined that session and you've lost everything that you've tried to build.
Oh,
The way I like,
no,
right,
not true at
right.
all. That's
No, it's
crazy.
not. First of all, it's not true. And I think, like you said, I like the easy, low intensity, easy run. I think that's an easy category to use. And also, I think we just have to distinguish this from the harder runs and what the intent is. Because obviously, if you eat up all your energy on what is supposed to be easy, you're not going to have as much for the harder runs. And they both matter and they're both part of a well-balanced plan. But if you just really keep a lot of, reserve on your easy runs, then you just have more to give on the hard sessions, and you can push maybe a couple more intervals, you can push a little bit faster, and we know that this is where things are also going to shift. So I think it's really about finding that balance between, okay, those runs are easy, so I'm just not going to bet the house on those. I'm just going to do them, and I know they're good. And if I'm a little bit above, I'm a little bit below, it's not the end of the world. But then I have as much energy as I can for the hard stuff.
Yeah, that's a really good point because, the hard stuff is, I think, just as important as your overall mileage. But on a run to run comparison, your workout is probably more important than just your easy run the day before. Um, but, of course, with that said, as long as you are feeling good and not getting injured and able to run your workouts, feeling pretty good and hitting the splits that you need to be able to hit, that's another subjective marker that your easy runs are where they need to be. And, like we've become so obsessed with like zone 2 heart rates right now. And, I did an episode of the Strength Running podcast with a physiologist who's also like a 2:37 marathoner. So he's pretty good. He's training to run about 2:30 in the marathon. And we recorded this episode in July. It was really hot outside. And everyone was talking about, well, because of the heat and cardiac drift, I'm running all of my runs either in zone 3, but sometimes my heart rate is drifting into zone 4 territory. And that's not the purpose of the run. And it's still okay to do that sometimes. You don't just have to walk for a majority of your easy runs in the summer to ensure that your heart rate is in that zone 2 territory because it's not the same, like it's not the same as if you are running, your actual zone 4 pace, even if your heart rate is in that zone 4 territory, because your body does all sorts of interesting adaptations, right? So one of the things that it does to help cool yourself down when it's really hot outside is that it pumps your blood faster, but with less stroke volume per heart stroke. So your heart rate is higher, but it's not as powerful. And so that's just an interesting thing that your body does. And it also just shows that you can't compare, a heart rate of, say, 165 when it's 85 degrees out and really hot to a heart rate of 165 when you're running half marathon race pace on a cool day. Those efforts are not comparable, but the heat gives you this, subtle indication that it is, but it's sort of misleading you.
Yeah, and since you talked about heart rate zones, that's not even talking about the fact that the percentages that your watch gives you, out of the box might be yours right now. They might not. And if they are yours now, they might change over time as you get fitter and as you progress in training. So you have to be careful to try to adhere to those heart rate zones very, very strictly because it's not the whole picture, right? It's one data point, and we have to take it for what it is with all its upsides and all its flaws. But we can't rely solely on this because otherwise we're probably going to run into some issues like you just mentioned.
100%.
Jason, I want to finish with one last question. Since we're talking about zone 2, since you mentioned Peter Attia, what's your take on the 80-20 rule when it comes to easy training? And how would you split a training week when it comes to low intensity and the rest of it?
Great question. So 80-20, popularized by my brother from another mother, Matt Fitzgerald, a great author and running coach and runner himself. So this was an intensity distribution that he discovered most elite runners have. And they run about 80% of their mileage easy and about 20% of their overall volume hard. Now that's pretty general. And I kind of liken this to the 10% rule with building mileage, that you shouldn't you shouldn't add more than 10% mileage from week to week. And I think it's a good general rule, but it can break down at certain points. So, for the beginner, 20% of your volume being pretty high intensity is probably a little bit too aggressive. I also think for the runner who might be training for a marathon, that might be a little bit too aggressive depending on where they are in the season. So, for example, if you're training for a marathon and you're running 50 miles a week, that means 10%, or I'm sorry, 20% of your mileage, which is 10 miles, could be at a high intensity effort. Well, you might be doing 2 workouts a week, and one of those workouts is a marathon pace workout, which actually counts as low intensity because that's, it's essentially zone 3. It's still aerobic. It really doesn't fit the definition of that 20%. So then that means you still have 10 miles during the week to run at, say a lactate threshold or faster. That to me is a recipe for injury. It's a recipe for peaking way too soon before your race. So you do want to be a little bit more careful with that. I tend to be a little bit more conservative, and I like to have like maybe an 85-15 or maybe even a 90-10 split. I don't really build training programs and then go back and sort of figure out what the intensity distribution is. I sort of look at what the athlete is currently doing, what they're capable of, and then we just take the next step. That might actually be giving them less intensity. It might be giving them more. It might be, changing how that intensity is structured throughout the week. So, for most runners, I think 1, maybe 2 workouts a week is the right approach for intensity. Having 2 dedicated days where you're going to do some type of structured, faster workout, whether that's a fartlek or track repetitions, a hill workout, some sort of threshold workout as well. These are all great workouts. And, this is what we would do once or twice a week.
The quote that was beat into my mind back in the day by somebody that I really appreciate, Pat Davidson, is that all models are wrong, but some are useful. And that 80-20
like
is a model. And we have to understand its upsides, but we have to understand its limits as well. And we can't just apply it as a blanket to everything that we do, because all models are wrong. Only some are useful. Jason, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. I feel like this could have been Joe Rogan 3-4 hour long podcast. So I might have to invite you back on in the future. In the meantime, if people want to know more about what you do, where can they follow you online?
Well, probably the best spot is strengthrunning.com. That's where you can, that's my home base. So you can see our blog. We have email courses on all kinds of different topics, including strength training. I know we talked a lot about that today. We also have the Strength Running YouTube channel and the Strength Running podcast. And the podcast is probably something that's the most interesting to this audience, because I try to treat my listeners like a pro runner. So I bring in the strength experts, the running coaches, the dietitians, the sports psychologists, the physical therapists, all of the subject matter experts that a pro runner might surround themselves with so that they can race to their potential. I try to bring those people to, your everyday runner. And the goal is to help you achieve your potential and run your next personal best. So I hope folks listen, find it helpful. And thanks for having me on. This was a great conversation.
Thanks so much, Jason. Take care.
Thanks a lot for watching this episode. If you want to support the show, there are 2 good ways that you can do so. You can leave a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or you can help grow this community by sharing this episode on your social media. Thanks for your support, and I'll see you in the next episode.